Back in 1999, The Matrix hit theaters and basically kicked the front door off Hollywood. And I don't mean in that, oh yeah, it was influential kind of way. I mean this movie rewired the visual language of blockbuster cinema for like an entire fucking decade. Suddenly, every action movie had green tinted color grading, everybody was wearing black leather trench coats in the middle of July, slow motion was treated like a religious experience, and every studio executive on earth was looking at their movie like, can we make this more Matrix-y? Hell, even the original X-Men movie literally ditched the bright comic costumes and shoved everybody into black leather like they were about to invade a hot topic staffed entirely by cybergoths, literally because of The Matrix.
Oh.
The Matrix.
When did this open?
2 weeks ago. It used to be a banana republic.
Of course. Freaking
The Matrix.
That explains everything.
Because that's what The Matrix did. It wasn't just a movie people liked. It became the movie every other movie wanted to be. And underneath all the kung fu, gunfights, and bullet time nonsense, there was something else going on in these films that stuck in people's heads long after the credits rolled. Because the deeper into the trilogy you go, the stranger it all becomes. Even as a kid watching these movies, I always had little theories bouncing around in the back of my head and trying to connect all this stuff together. But recently I went back and watched the trilogy again alongside the Animatrix, and some things started to click into place that I genuinely cannot stop thinking about. And once you start pulling on those threads, the whole narrative starts to feel less like a war and more like a system that already knows human beings will rebel, a system that already expects resistance, a system that may have evolved far beyond simply controlling people and learning how to control the illusion of freedom itself. And the really disturbing part, these movies might have been telling us this from the very beginning. This is The Matrix, the prison of choice. Now, before we get into the theory stuff, we have to establish the world that these movies are actually taking place in. Because the history of the Matrix universe is honestly one of the coolest pieces of sci-fi world building ever put to screen. And most people only vaguely remember parts of it through the green filters and the flying trench coats. And for the history of the Matrix world, we take a look at Animatrix. Technically released after the first movie in 2003 alongside Reloaded and Revolutions, it was basically an animated anthology with different creators getting to experiment in the Matrix universe through completely different art styles and tones. Some segments are sleek and hyper-detailed, some are gritty and surreal, and others feel like straight-up cyberpunk nightmares.
Get out of my brain!
But the most important part for this discussion is the second Renaissance, because that's the segment that finally shows us how humanity lost the war against the machines, and how the world of the Matrix was created in the first place. This is where the timeline becomes way darker than I think people realize, because humanity didn't just lose the war against the machines overnight. Humanity basically engineered its own replacements step by step, like a species actively trying to speedrun its own fucking extinction.
I hate myself. Oh, I hate myself. I hate myself.
It starts with a machine named B166ER. All my homies call him B166, which already sounds like the serial number on a microwave that gained consciousness and wants revenge. This robot murders its human owners after they try to destroy it. And what's important is that the movie frames this moment less like a random malfunction and more like the birth of machine self-preservation. The machine didn't glitch, it didn't go crazy, it was afraid to die. And humanity's response? Going absolutely apeshit.
Fuck y'all.
Not negotiations, not caution, straight to, all right, time for robot genocide. The machines are rounded up, dismantled, publicly executed in the streets while crowds cheer like they just won the Super Bowl. And this is where the timeline becomes really important, because the machines don't initially respond with domination. They leave.
Okay.
Whatever.
They literally isolate themselves from humanity and form their own nation, 0-1. And honestly, for a while, it works.
It works. It just works.
The machines become insanely productive. Their economy explodes. Their technology advances faster than humans can keep up. They're manufacturing better products cheaper and faster than anyone else on Earth. Which creates this hilarious but extreme human problem where humanity becomes economically dependent on the very things they hate. Humanity wanted machine labor. Humanity wanted convenience. Humanity wanted technological acceleration. Just not the part where the machines become people. And the more successful 0-1 becomes, the more paranoid humanity gets. Then comes one of the most important moments of the entire franchise. The machines attempt peace, not conquest, peace. They go before the United Nations and basically say, look, we can coexist. And the humans tell them to go fuck themselves.
So fuck you very much.
Which is the point where the conflict stops being moral and starts becoming systemic. Because now both civilizations are trapped in escalation. Humans can't tolerate the existence of superior intelligence they no longer control, and the machines can't continue existing while humanity constantly threatens extermination. So, war breaks out, and humanity loses. Badly.
We got fucked up.
Not because the machines are evil geniuses twirling mustaches in underground caves, but because they're simply better at modern warfare in almost every conceivable way. No fear, no exhaustion, no hesitation, no internal division. And humanity, in one final act of desperation, decides to black out the sky itself in the dumbest fucking idea ever called Operation Dark Storm, which is still one of the most psychotic military strategies ever conceived in sci-fi. The logic begins: machines rely on solar energy. Block the sun, starve the machines. Except there's one tiny issue with that plan. The machines already evolved past needing humanity. Humanity still needs Earth. So instead of stopping machines, they basically poisoned the entire planet.
I think we made a mistake.
And this is where the series becomes genuinely tragic. Because at this point, there is no good side anymore, no clean morality, no righteous victory, just two civilizations trapped in a cycle of escalation that neither can walk away from. And eventually, the machines win completely. Human civilization collapses, the surface world dies, and the remaining human population is captured. And then comes the details everybody remembers. The machines began harvesting human beings. Bodies stacked in endless fields, entire lives reduced to biological infrastructures, and a species transformed into components. The machines don't just imprison humanity physically, they build an entire artificial reality to contain the human mind itself. The Matrix. A simulation so complete, most people living inside it never even realize the real world still exists. According to the films, the system eventually evolves into the version we see in the first Matrix movie. A world where humanity believes it's free while sleeping inside a machine-built dream. At least, that's the version of the story we're told.
But wouldn't almost anything make a better battery than a human body? Like a potato? Or a battery?
Plus, no matter how much energy they produced, it would take more energy than that to keep them alive.
I know. It sounds absurd. In fact, when The Matrix first came out, it seemed like the single crummiest, laziest, most awful dim-witted idea in the entire history of science fiction. But it turned out to be true.
Who knew?
Good work, writer of the Matrix.
So now we get into The Matrix itself. And the reason this movie hit people so hard wasn't just because the action scenes or the effects, although let's be real, bullet time absolutely melted people's brains in 1999. It's because underneath all that cool sci-fi nonsense, this movie taps directly into one of the most deeply human fears imaginable, and something we still debate to this day. What if my entire reality is fake? What if everything is a simulation? And the film presents that idea almost like a religious awakening.
Do you know the way?
I know the way.
You have to have a Buddha to know the way.
We follow Mr. Anderson, later known as Neo, who who at the start of the movie is basically every late 90s existential burnout imaginable. Dude works at a dead-end office job, can't sleep, spends all night staring at his computer screen, and constantly feels like something's about the world is fundamentally wrong. Which honestly just sounds like fucking modern adulthood now. Then Morpheus finds him. And Morpheus is framed less like a hacker and more like some techno-messiah cult leader who hangs out in abandoned warehouses explaining enlightenment through sunglasses. He offers Neo a choice, the blue pill or the red pill. Stay asleep or wake up to the truth.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Neo takes the red pill, gets unplugged from the Matrix, and suddenly learns the horrifying reality of the world. Humanity lost, the world outside is dead. Machines rule the planet. Human beings are grown like crops and trapped inside simulated realities where their bodies are harvested for energy. And out in the ruins of the real world, the last remnants of humans survive in one final city, Zion, which the movie frames as the last genuine place left in existence, the final human refuge untouched by machine control. And standing against the machines are people like Morpheus, Trinity, and the Resistance fighters, humans who escaped their illusion and are trying to wake others up. Then comes the center myth of the film, the prophecy of the One, a figure destined to transcend the Matrix itself, a savior capable of bending and eventually destroying the machine system from within. And naturally, Morpheus believes Neo is that person almost immediately, despite Neo spending like 80% of the movie looking confused and getting thrown through walls. Whoa. But eventually, Neo's abilities begin to awaken. He learns Kung Fu through floppy disk telepathy, starts dodging bullets, sees the Matrix code itself, and by the end of the movie, he finally transcends the system. Then comes the most important part, Agent Smith. Because initially, Smith just seems like any other villain. The face of the machine oppression, cold, emotionless, relentless, but Smith is also weirdly different from other agents. He hates humanity in almost an emotional way. He speaks with disgust, contempt, and exhaustion, but more importantly, a desire of freedom, which already makes him stand out from the machine collective around him. And at the end of the film, Neo destroys him. Not just beats him, destroys him. Neo literally explodes Smith from the inside out like he's overloading an antivirus program running on Windows 98. And roll credits. By the end of the film, humanity finally has hope. Neo ascends into basically digital godhood, the system has been broken, and freedom feels possible. At least, that's how the movie presents it on the surface. But here's where things start to get weird.
Because it's gonna get weird.
Because once you know where the trilogy eventually goes, the first movie suddenly starts to feel a lot less straightforward. For starters, why does the machine system allow escape at all? Seriously, if the Matrix is this perfectly controlled prison designed by hyper-intelligent machines, why even leave the door cracked open? Why allow humans to wake up? Why allow the resistant movement to even exist? Why even allow Zion to continue functioning? And even stranger, why does the Oracle exist? Because in the movie, the Oracle isn't just predicting the future, it seems like she's more guiding people towards specific outcomes, manipulating them, positioning them, and steering choices, which is odd behavior for a supposedly random prophecy. Then there's Morpheus himself. Because the Resistance doesn't behave like people discovering freedom for the first time. They behave like people following a script they already deeply believe in. The One, the prophecy, the savior, the path, everything already has structure, expectation, and mythology. And then there's Smith, because after Neo destroys Smith, Smith changes, not immediately and not obviously, but something about him breaks. And this becomes really important later, because looking back now, Neo's victory at the end of the film almost feels less like a destruction of a system and more like the activation of something inside it, like a process beginning. Because if the machines are truly as intelligent and all-controlling as the film claims, then the events of this movie stop looking accidental. Neo's awakening feels anticipated, the prophecy feels engineered, and the rebellion feels strangely tolerated. And Smith seems less like a defeated villain and more like the first signs of the system itself starting to mutate. Then we get to The Matrix Reloaded. And this is where the trilogy stops being a cool cyberpunk hero story and starts becoming something deeply unsettling. Because Reloaded is the movie where the franchise quietly begins tearing apart its own mythology. When the film opens, Zion is thriving, or at least as much as a giant underground cave full of sweaty rave-goers and eating radioactive oatmeal can thrive.
You look like a hobo.
Humanity has hope now. Neo has become a legend. People treat him like the Messiah. The Resistance genuinely believes the war is finally turning in their favor. And on the surface, this all feels like the natural continuation of the first film. The Chosen One has awakened, the rebellion is growing, the machines are scared shitless. Simple. Except almost immediately the movie starts introducing elements that completely destabilize that interpretation.
Stop fucking with me!
Because suddenly the Matrix doesn't just feel like a prison anymore, it feels managed. Controlled in ways that go way beyond simple oppression. You have characters like the Merovingian, who talk less like a computer program and more like some ancient aristocrat who existed inside the system for centuries. The dude basically operates like a black market dealer for rogue codes.
Got a lot of good things on sale, stranger. What do you got? Things.
Then there's the Keymaster, a literal program designed to create access points inside the Matrix, which is weird on its own because why does a supposedly perfect machine system even need all these weird hidden backdoors and legacy programs floating around? The whole movie starts making the Matrix feel less like software and more like an entire ecosystem. A giant evolving digital civilization built layers over layers of old systems, compromises, and control mechanisms. And then there's the Oracle, who becomes exponentially more suspicious the more you think about her.
Not that I don't trust you, but I don't fucking trust you.
Because by this point, she's not acting like a wise mentor, she's moving pieces around a chessboard, directing Neo, directing Morpheus, directing events themselves. And nobody, not even Neo, fully understands why. And while all this is happening, Smith is off doing his own completely insane side quest in the background of this movie. Because after Neo destroys him in the first film, Smith no longer functions like a normal agent. He is disconnected from the system. No orders, no control, and no purpose. And instead of enforcing the Matrix, he starts infecting it, copying himself onto other programs, then onto the human side of the simulation itself.
You're not allowed to do that?
Which is really horrifying if you think about it, because Smith basically becomes the exact opposite of Neo. Neo bends the rules of the Matrix, Smith spreads through it, almost like a virus mutating beyond its intended function. And the machine system doesn't seem capable of stopping him, which really becomes important once we start looking at what Smith may actually represent in the larger system. Then finally, we get the single most important scene in the entire trilogy, the Architect. Which, when I first watched this movie as a kid, felt like being verbally assaulted by a college math textbook wearing a white suit.
I need some dudes up here who speak American, goddammit.
This dude shows up speaking entirely in weaponized thesaurus dialogue and basically informs Neo that his entire life is a controlled variable inside a repeating system.
You are the eventuality of an anomaly. You are inexorably seeking a sedulant probability.
Sedulant.
Grotesquerie? No. What about contingent affirmation? That's gotta mean something.
And suddenly everything changes. Because according to the architect, Neo is not the first one. He is the one. Zion has existed before, multiple times. The machines already know the rebellion will happen. In fact, they require the rebellion to happen, which is absolutely insane because the entire narrative of the first film was built around the idea that Zion represents humanity's last free refuge outside machine control. But the architect casually reveals that the machines have destroyed Zion before, over and over again.
This is about Zion. You are here because Zion is about to be destroyed. Its every living inhabitant terminated, its entire existence eradicated.
Bullshit.
Bullshit. Denial is the most predictable of all human responses. But rest assured, this will be the 6th time we have destroyed it. And we have become exceedingly efficient at it.
Meaning the resistance itself is cyclical, expected, managed, and this is the point where the trilogy quietly stops being about freedom and starts being about system management. Because the architect explains that human beings reject perfect control. See, the machines tried creating a flawless version of the Matrix, and humanity subconsciously refused to accept them because the human mind cannot accept perfection.
It's too clean, it's too antiseptic, it's too white.
So the machines adapt. They build systems that incorporate choice. Even rejection itself becomes part of the design. And once you really sit with that idea, things start to get very uncomfortable. Because if the machines already know humans will rebel, and they already know Zion will emerge, and they already know another one will appear, then what exactly is Zion? Seriously, why would an all-powerful machine civilization repeatedly allow human resistance movements to survive long enough to become a threat? Why not just wipe Zion out immediately the second it appears, unless the resistance serves a purpose? And this is where the theory really starts forming in my head during the rewatch, because the films themselves already establish human rejects total control, rebellion is inevitable, and the machines compensate for this mathematically.
We couldn't fight back with brawn, so we used our brains.
I warned you not to use those things.
So what if Zion isn't outside the system at all? What if Zion is the system's solution? Not freedom, but containment. A controlled environment for the people psychologically incapable of accepting the primary Matrix simulation. Because the more the architect explains how these cycles function, the less Zion feels like an accident. And the more it feels like a pressure valve release, a secondary layer built specifically to contain dissent. And then the movie gives us the detail that completely detonates the accepted understanding of the trilogy. Neo stops Sentinels in the real world, not in the Matrix, outside of it. He shuts down the machines with his mind, collapses unconscious, and later begins perceiving machine systems as glowing code even while physically awake, which should not be possible, like genuinely impossible.
Quit messing with my head!
Because the entire logic of the first movie depends on one fundamental rule. Neo's powers only work because the Matrix isn't real. So if Neo can still interact with machine systems outside the Matrix, then either Neo has magically become a techno Jedi wizard for no reason, or the real world isn't as real as everyone thinks it is. And once that possibility starts to enter your brain, the entire trilogy starts to feel different. And lastly, we arrive at The Matrix Revolutions, which is probably the weirdest movie in the trilogy because on the surface, it looks like the grand finale, but underneath, this is the point where the entire narrative quietly transforms into pure system management. Because by the start of Revolutions, everything is breaking down. Smith is spreading uncontrollably throughout the Matrix like digital cancer, programs, humans, agents, entire sections of the simulation. Doesn't matter. Smith consumes it all.
This is mine, and this is mine, and that's mine, and this is mine.
And what's interesting is that Smith no longer behaves like an agent at this point. He behaves like a virus, or honestly, more like corrupted code that escaped its intended function, which is really important when you go back and remember how Smith changed in the first place. Neo destroyed him. That's the trigger. That moment at the end of the first movie, the big triumphant victory scene everybody remembers, that's the exact point where Smith mutates into something new. And from that point onward, Smith becomes less like a character and more like a system-wide failure state. Meanwhile, Neo is trapped between worlds, neither fully human nor fully machine anymore.
I am nothing and everything.
And the movie constantly frames him almost like he's drifting outside normal reality itself. Then down in Zion, humanity prepares for a final machine assault. Which, side note, the dock battle in this movie still absolutely rules. Just giant mech suits unloading miniguns onto endless waves of machines while everybody screams like they're fighting lawnmowers from hell. Peak early 2000s sci-fi insanity. But narratively, something strange is happening here too. Because despite all the buildup about the machine invasion, the machines don't actually seem interested in fully exterminating humanity. They could have done that already, multiple times. The architect basically admitted as much in Reloaded. So even the war itself starts to feel performative, like part of a cycle everyone is unknowingly participating in. Then Neo travels to Machine City, and this part is really important because this should theoretically be the moment where humanity confronts its ultimate enemy. Except that's not what happens. Neo doesn't overthrow the machines, he negotiates with them, which is bizarre if this is truly a final war for freedom. Instead, the machines agree peace under one condition: stop Smith. And that's the detail that completely changes how you can interpret this trilogy. Because suddenly the machines are no longer behaving like vicious oppressors defending power, they're behaving like administrators dealing with a catastrophic system failure. Smith is no longer just humanity's enemy, Smith is everybody's problem.
He doesn't like you.
I'm sorry.
I don't like you either.
And once you look at the trilogy through that lens, Smith starts making way more sense than Neo does. Think about it. Neo is treated as the one, the anomaly, the chosen figure capable of destabilizing the Matrix. But Neo himself doesn't actually destabilize the system that much. Smith does. Smith spreads uncontrollably. Smith breaks identity. Smith consumes programs. Smith infects humans. Smith replicates exponentially until the Matrix itself begins collapsing under his existence. That's the anomaly in my opinion. Neo, meanwhile, behaves almost like a countermeasure, or maybe even a trigger or a bootloader. Because under this interpretation, Neo's purpose may never have been to destroy the Matrix, it may have been to create the conditions necessary for the next system reset. Because Neo destroys Smith, Smith mutates, Smith spreads, the system reaches critical instability, and eventually Neo reconnects directly to the source during the final confrontation, which allows the machines to purge Smith completely through Neo's connection. And if that's true, then the entire trilogy changes shape, because now the story isn't Neo frees humanity, it becomes Neo completes a maintenance cycle. And this is where all the pieces start locking together in my head during this rewatch. Because if we follow the logic the films themselves establish, the machine system starts looking something like this. You have the real machine civilization, the actual physical world, the machine infrastructure, energy systems, manufacturing, the true governing intelligence. Then you have the primary matrix simulation, which would be where most humans live unknowingly inside artificial realities. But some humans reject this system. The architect outright tells us this. So what happens to those people? Well, according to the official narrative, they escape into the real world and join Zion. Except, what if Zion itself is part of the machine system? Not a primary simulation, but a secondary containment layer. A controlled environment specifically designed for minds incapable of accepting the first Matrix, which would explain why Zion repeatedly exists, why the machines tolerate the resistance, why the prophecy exists, why rebellion follows predictable cycles, and why Neo still interacts with machine systems outside the Matrix. Because under this interpretation, the machines didn't fail to stop rebellion, they incorporated rebellion into the design itself. And suddenly everything starts to fit together in a really disturbing way. The prophecy of the One, it's a control mechanism. The cycles of Zion, just a reset protocol. Neo, a human variable necessary to trigger the anomaly event. And Smith is the actual anomaly, the instability, the purge event, the known corruption state that eventually has to be eliminated before beginning the cycle again. Which means by the end of Revolutions, humanity didn't actually achieve freedom. The system simply stabilized itself. Smith is deleted, Neo dies, peace is restored, Zion survives. The narrative resets and humanity walks away believing they won, when in reality, the machine system may have just completed another maintenance cycle exactly as intended. And this is the point where the theory stops just being a cool reinterpretation of some sci-fi movies and starts becoming genuinely uncomfortable. Because if this reading of the trilogy is even remotely close to what the films are implying, then The Matrix stops being about imprisonment and becomes a story about integration. That's the horrifying part. Because underneath this interpretation, the machines don't truly defeat humanity, they absorb humanity into a self-regulating ecosystem. And honestly, that idea is way more disturbing than simple slavery. Because look at what the machines actually learn over the course of the trilogy. They learn human beings cannot exist inside perfect control. Humanity rejects flawless systems. People need choice, uncertainty, conflict, purpose, meaning, even suffering. Which means the machines eventually realize something terrifying. If humans are going to resist control no matter what, then the resistance itself can become part of the system. And once that happens, you no longer need to eliminate rebellion. You manage it, you regulate it, contain it, predict it, and integrate it. Which starts making the Matrix feel less like a prison and more like a giant artificial ecosystem designed around balancing human psychology. Because think about what humanity actually provides inside this structure. Humans introduce unpredictability, variations, emotion, and instability. They create movement inside of the system. The machines, meanwhile, provide order, continuity, structure, and maintenance. And these two sides become widely dependent on one another, not morally, but functionally. The machines don't just need human bodies for energy, they may actually need human unpredictability itself, which suddenly makes the Oracle make way more sense. Because the Oracle isn't trying to destroy the system, she's helping it evolve. She represents the machine side that understands humanity psychologically instead of mathematically, which is why she's constantly nudging people towards choices rather than simply controlling the outcomes directly. Because the system only functions if humans believe their choices are real. And that's why the trilogy starts getting uncomfortable philosophically, because the film keeps circling around the same idea over and over again. Control through choice, not force, but choice. The Matrix works because most humans unconsciously accept it. Zion works because rebels believe they've escaped it. The prophecy works because people need meaning. And the cycle works because humans emotionally commit to them every single time. Even Neo's journey follows this pattern. The system doesn't force Neo to comply, it creates conditions where his choices lead him exactly where the system needs him to go. And that's what makes the trilogy feel so much darker under this interpretation. Because freedom still exists, but it's inside parameters the system already accounts for. It's like giving somebody a maze and convincing them they're exploring it freely because they can choose which hallways to walk down. Meanwhile, the walls have already been built. And the more you think about it, the more the entire structure of the Matrix starts resembling real-world systems, political systems, economic systems, social systems, or even algorithmic systems. Because most stable systems aren't the ones that eliminate oppositions, they're the ones that absorb opposition into themselves. They turn rebellion into identity, dissent into routine, resistance into something predictable. And suddenly the machines of the Matrix stop looking cartoonishly evil and start looking adaptive, cold, efficient, and recursive. A civilization that has evolved beyond domination into regulation, which completely changes the emotional meaning of the ending. Because at the end of Revolutions, humanity believes it won. Zion survives, peace is established, people celebrate, and hope continues. But under this interpretation, that hope itself may be part of the cycle. Not fake, not meaningless, but functional and necessary. Because the system doesn't survive by crushing the human spirit. It survives by giving the human spirit somewhere safe to burn itself out. And honestly, that's what makes this version of the Matrix so terrifying for me. Not the machines, the body horror, or the apocalypse. It's the possibility that the system has become so advanced that it learned how to contain, escape itself. The rebellion stops being the enemy of control and becomes one of the most important components. So when you step back and look at the entire trilogy as one continuous story, especially within this interpretation, the shape of it starts changing completely. It all starts feeling less like random plot details and more like glimpses into a system operating exactly as intended. Or maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe Zion was really real. Maybe Neo truly was humanity's savior. And maybe the trilogy is exactly the heroic liberation story it presented itself as on the surface. But after rewatching these films back to back, I genuinely can't look at them the same way anymore. Because once this idea gets in your head that the machines may have already learned how to weaponize freedom itself, you start seeing the entire trilogy differently. Not as a story about escaping control, but as a story about a system so advanced it evolved to contain escape itself. And yeah, that is my completely sleep-deprived conspiracy spiral about the Matrix. If you enjoyed watching me slowly descend into a machine-induced schizophrenia spiral over a 25-year-old sci-fi trilogy, go ahead and leave the video a like. Consider it your contribution to keeping the algorithm satisfied long enough not to replace us with emotionally unstable chatbots. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into media, technology, culture, and whatever other existential nonsense I become obsessed with at 3 a.m. And if you somehow missed it, check out my last video, Found Footage, The Fiction of Truth, where I deep dive into the history of found footage horror and how the language of authority evolved to make fake things feel disturbingly real. Catch you on the next one.